Grant always believed that some people were meant to find each other, that the world, in all its chaos, could still bring two souls together at the right time. That's how he felt when he met Lisa. She wasn't just another person who crossed his path. She became the path itself. They met in college, both studying architecture, both dreaming of a quiet, steady life. She laughed easily, trusted deeply, and made every ordinary day feel significant. They married 5 years later, in a small ceremony in a white wooden chapel just outside of town. Grant could still remember the smell of the rain that morning, the way her hand trembled slightly as she slipped the ring on his finger. To him, that moment sealed everything: his best friend, his lover, his family. For the first 6 years, their life was almost picture perfect. They had 3 children, two of them identical twins with Lisa's green eyes and Grant's crooked smile. Their suburban home in Brookfield was warm, filled with noise and love. Toys scattered on the floor, kitchen walls covered with children's drawings. Grant often came home to find Lisa dancing with the twins in the living room while the baby laughed in her high chair. He thought this was what happiness looked like. Not flashy, not dramatic, just consistent. A warm coffee in the morning, a quiet dinner in the evening, a kiss before bed. They talked about growing old together, traveling once the kids were older, maybe even building their dream house by the lake. Looking back, Grant would later realize that those were the years that defined what he believed love was: unconditional, safe, and shared. He didn't know then that the same love would one day be tested in a way he couldn't imagine. It started quietly, like most storms do. There wasn't a fight or some dramatic argument, just a conversation that didn't sound quite right. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Lisa sat at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone, her brow furrowed. Grant noticed her silence, but didn't think much of it. They both had busy lives. Moments of quiet were common. But that night, she looked different, distant, thoughtful, almost nervous. "Grant," she said finally, "I've been thinking about something important." He smiled, waiting. "Okay, what is it?" She hesitated. "You know my sister, Sarah, and how she and Kevin have been trying to have a baby for years." "Of course," Grant nodded. "It's been tough on them." Lisa took a deep breath. "Well, I've decided I'm going to help them. I want to be a surrogate. For them." For a moment, Grant thought he'd misheard her. He blinked, unsure if she was serious. "Wait, what?" Lisa's voice was steady now, almost rehearsed. "Sarah can't carry a pregnancy. They've been saving for IVF, but the doctors said her body can't handle it. I've already talked to her and Kevin and to a clinic. I can do this for them." Grant felt something twist inside him. "You've already talked to them? To a clinic?" "Without me. I was just exploring options," she said quickly. "It's not a big deal yet." "Not a big deal," he repeated, his voice rising. "Lisa, this isn't like baking a cake for your sister. You're talking about carrying someone else's baby, while we're still raising 3 of our own." Lisa's expression hardened. "They're family, Grant. I can help them in a way no one else can. It's something I have to do." He stared at her, stunned. There was conviction in her eyes. Not guilt, not hesitation. Just determination. That night, long after Lisa went to bed, Grant sat alone in the dark kitchen, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator. Something about her tone, her certainty, scared him. He realized, for the first time in years, that he and his wife weren't standing on the same side anymore. Grant barely slept that night. His thoughts kept circling, refusing to quiet down. By morning, he convinced himself it had to be a misunderstanding. Maybe Lisa was just being impulsive, trying to help without realizing the consequences. But when he brought it up the next day, she was more certain than ever. They stood in the kitchen, the smell of coffee hanging heavy in the air. "Lisa, we need to talk about what you said last night," Grant began, keeping his voice calm. She looked up from her mug. "About Sarah? I told her I'd start the preliminary tests this week." Grant froze. "You already told her that?" "Yes," she said simply. "It's happening." He ran a hand over his face, trying to keep control. "You're not even asking me. You're just doing it." "I'm informing you," Lisa replied. "I don't need permission to help my sister." "Permission?" His voice cracked with disbelief. "Lisa, we're married. Everything we decide affects both of us and our kids. You think it's normal to make a life-changing medical decision without even talking to me first." She sighed, as if exhausted by his reaction. "I knew you'd react like this. That's why I didn't bring it up earlier. Sarah's been through so much. I thought you'd at least try to understand." Grant stared at her, stunned. "Understand? You're going to put your body through hell for 9 months for your sister and her husband. And I'm supposed to smile and support it? You didn't even tell me before talking to them or the clinic." Lisa's tone grew sharper. "You're making this about you when it's about doing something good. You've always said family matters. Well, this is family." Something inside him snapped. "Family," he said quietly. "Our family is right here. Me, you, our kids. That's supposed to come first. But you didn't even think about us before making your decision." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the kitchen clock. Lisa turned away, muttering something about needing to pick up the twins from school. Grant stood there, frozen, watching her grab her keys and walk out the door. It wasn't just what she'd said. It was how easily she'd dismissed him, as if his feelings were an inconvenience. In that moment, he realized this wasn't just an argument. It was the beginning of a fracture, one that might never heal. The weeks that followed were heavy and silent. Grant and Lisa moved through the same house like strangers, orbiting each other but never colliding. She was focused, almost mechanical, scheduling doctor visits, researching hormone treatments, exchanging emails with her sister. Every time Grant tried to start a conversation, she'd find an excuse to leave the room. He felt invisible in his own home. Their dinners, once filled with laughter and stories from the kids, became quiet affairs where only the sound of silverware filled the air. The twins started asking questions. "Why isn't Mommy eating with us? Why do you and Mommy sound angry?" Grant didn't know what to say. He'd look at them, their little faces, their confusion, and feel that sharp ache in his chest. How could he explain that the woman he loved had chosen someone, over them all? One evening, he caught Lisa on the phone with her sister. Her tone was soft, almost tender. "Of course I'm sure, Sarah. I want to do this. You and Kevin deserve a family." Grant stood in the hallway, listening, guilt washing over him for eavesdropping, but pain rooting him to the floor. Deserve a family. The words echoed in his mind. Did that mean their own family, the one they'd built together, wasn't enough anymore? When she hung up, he stepped into the doorway. "You're really going through with it," he said quietly. Lisa turned, startled, then defensive. "You're still angry?" "I'm confused," he said. "I thought we made decisions together. But you've shut me out completely." "I'm doing this out of love," she said coldly. "You should be proud of me." Grant's jaw tightened. "Proud? You didn't just betray me, Lisa. You betrayed what we built. You didn't even think how this would affect our kids or me." Lisa's face hardened. "Not everything revolves around your feelings, Grant. That was the last straw." He walked past her, his heart pounding. "Then maybe you should start thinking about someone else's feelings for once." He went to sleep on the couch that night, and the night after that, too. The bed they had shared for years no longer felt like home. Every morning, Grant woke up feeling like an intruder in his own life. He couldn't shake the image of his wife preparing to carry another man's child. It wasn't jealousy, it was grief. Grief for the life they'd lost before it was even over. By early spring, Lisa had officially begun her hormone treatment. The sight of medication boxes and syringes in the bathroom cabinet made Grant's stomach tighten every time he opened it. It wasn't just what she was doing. It was that she'd made the decision alone and expected him to accept it silently, like a spectator in his own marriage. One morning, Grant woke up to find her sitting on the edge of the bed, holding a small injector. The twins were still asleep. He paused in the doorway, unsure whether to speak. She didn't even look up. "Morning," he said quietly. "Morning," she answered, her tone flat, focused. He watched as she injected herself, then placed the needle neatly into a disposal box. The calmness in her movements, the absence of emotion, unsettled him. "Doesn't it bother you?" he asked finally. Lisa sighed. "Grant, I've told you a dozen times, this is the right thing to do. It's helping Sarah and Kevin. I can handle it." He shook his head. "You're handling it by shutting everyone else out." She turned to him, irritation flashing in her eyes. "You're making me feel guilty for trying to do something good." Grant took a step closer. "No, I'm asking why you didn't even talk to me before doing it. Why you act like my feelings don't matter. Because every time I try, you turn it into a fight, she snapped. I need support, not judgment. He stared at her for a long moment before answering. Support comes with honesty. Lisa, you lost that when you made this decision without me. She stood up abruptly, brushing past him. I can't do this with you right now. When the door shut behind her, Grant sat down on the bed and buried his face in his hands. The sound of the car engine starting outside echoed like a slow goodbye. Later that night, he found himself sitting in the kitchen alone again, scrolling through old photos on his phone, the day they brought the twins home, birthdays, family vacations. Smiles that looked so effortless back then. Now the house felt cold. Every injection, every clinic visit, every quiet argument pulled them further apart. He still loved her, but it felt like loving a memory, something that no longer existed. He didn't know it yet, but the resentment growing inside him was turning into something irreversible. Grant didn't want to believe it had come to this. For weeks, he told himself that maybe, somehow, Lisa would realize what she was doing, that she'd stop the process before it went too far. But each time he came home, there was another appointment reminder pinned to the fridge, another call with Sarah, another distant silence between them. One evening, he walked in from work to find Lisa sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by medical papers and clinic folders. Her expression was calm, too calm. He set his keys down and asked, "Is this really happening? You're still going through with the embryo transfer?" She looked up, eyes tired. "Yes, Grant. It's scheduled for next week." That was it. The last thread snapped. "Next week," he repeated softly. "So, in a few days, you'll be pregnant with another man's child. And I'm just supposed to live here and pretend it's normal?" Lisa exhaled sharply. "It's not like that, and you know it. This isn't cheating. It's compassion." Grant laughed bitterly. "Compassion? You've completely destroyed your own marriage, Lisa. You made me a stranger in my own home, and you still call it compassion?" Her face hardened. "You're being dramatic. It's not like I'm having an affair." He stared at her, his voice quiet but firm. "It feels like one. You've replaced me, not with a person, but with a purpose that doesn't include me." The air between them was heavy, almost suffocating. Grant realized then that no conversation, no pleading would change her mind. She'd already crossed a line in her heart long before the clinic ever got involved. That night, after putting the kids to bed, he sat at the kitchen table in the dark. The only light came from the small lamp by the sink. He opened his laptop and, with trembling hands, typed the words, "Divorce lawyer near me." It felt like betrayal, but also like relief. By the next morning, he had made his decision. He couldn't stand by and watch the woman he loved carry another man's child under the roof they'd built together. When he told her, she didn't believe him at first. "You're not serious," she said, her voice trembling. "I am," he said. "You made your choice, Lisa. Now I'm making mine." Tears welled in her eyes, but her tone turned sharp again. "You're abandoning me when I'm doing something selfless." Grant took a slow breath. "No, Lisa. You abandoned us when you decided my opinion didn't matter." He left the room before she could respond. That night, he slept in the guest room, and in the silence that followed, both of them knew the marriage they once had was gone. After Grant filed for divorce, the house turned cold and quiet. They were still living under one roof. The law required a year of separation before it could be finalized, but emotionally, they were already miles apart. Lisa moved into the guest room. They barely spoke except about the kids. Every morning, Grant went to work early to avoid awkward breakfasts, and every night, Lisa stayed in her room with the door locked. The children noticed. The twins stopped asking why mom and dad didn't sit together anymore. Even they could feel the wall between their parents. Sometimes Grant caught Lisa staring at him, her eyes full of anger, maybe regret. But he didn't ask. He'd already said everything there was to say. A few weeks later, Sarah and her husband Kevin came to visit. Lisa seemed nervous but happy to see them, while Grant felt only tension. They sat awkwardly in the living room, the air thick with unspoken resentment. Sarah smiled too brightly. Kevin avoided eye contact. "We just wanted to make sure everything's ready," Sarah said softly, glancing at Lisa's belly. Grant cut in. "Ready for what?" for my wife to give birth in my house to your child." The words hung heavy. Sarah's face went pale. Kevin shifted uncomfortably. Lisa glared at Grant, but said nothing. After a few minutes of strained silence, Sarah stood up. "We should go." Grant watched them leave, his chest tight with anger. For the first time, he realized his home no longer felt like his own. News of the argument spread quickly through Lisa's family. Within days, her mother called Grant angry, emotional, and accusing. "How could you speak to your wife's sister like that? She's suffering," the older woman scolded. Grant kept his tone calm, but firm. "She's suffering because Lisa made a choice that destroyed our marriage. I didn't." A few days later, Lisa's father showed up at their doorstep, his posture stiff, his voice low but threatening. "You're hurting my daughter, Grant. Maybe you should think twice before you push her too far." Grant didn't back down. "Then tell your daughter to stop pretending this is normal." Lisa, standing behind her father, crossed her arms and said coldly, "They're just trying to help." "Help?" Grant replied. "They're helping you ignore reality." When they left, the silence that followed felt heavier than before. Grant realized there was no reasoning with any of them. They had already chosen their side. As Lisa's pregnancy progressed, the house became a battlefield of silence. She grew tired and emotional, often asking Grant for help, to lift groceries, to take care of small chores. But he refused. "Ask Kevin," he said once, not looking up from his laptop. "It's his kid." Her eyes filled with tears. "You're cruel." "No," he said quietly. "Just done." The children began to sense the distance more clearly. They asked fewer questions, but watched everything. The slammed doors, the cold glances, the way their parents spoke only in short, flat sentences. Grant hated the tension, but couldn't forgive. Every movement Lisa made reminded him of the betrayal that had reshaped their lives. By the 7th month, Lisa's family was everywhere: calls, visits, opinions. Her mother scolded Grant for heartlessness, while her father tried to intimidate him into supporting his wife. Grant stayed calm. "She's carrying someone else's child. I owe her respect as the mother of my kids. Nothing more." The words spread fast, and soon everyone in Lisa's circle viewed him as the villain. But he didn't care anymore. He started spending more time outside the house, walking with the kids, working late, anything to avoid the emotional storm waiting behind the front door. Lisa noticed his absence, but didn't try to stop him. They had become two people surviving under the same roof, for the sake of appearances and the children, nothing else. It happened on a gray Saturday afternoon. Lisa returned from the store, struggling with heavy bags. Grant was in the living room, helping the kids with homework. "Grant," she called softly at first. "Can you help me, please?" He didn't move. "You managed to start this without me. You can finish it without me, too." Her voice rose. "You're unbelievable. I'm pregnant." He looked up calm but cold. "Not with my child." Something inside her broke. She slammed the bags down, tears spilling over. "You're cruel, Grant. You're punishing me for trying to help someone." He stood up slowly. "No, Lisa. I'm finally standing up for myself." She turned and left the room, crying, the sound of the door slamming echoing through the house like the final break between them. That night, they didn't speak. The silence said everything. It was late at night when Lisa's contractions began. She called out his name, panic in her voice, but Grant didn't move at first. "Grant, please. It's happening." He sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room, staring at the dark wall. 1,000 thoughts rushed through his mind. The years they'd shared, the betrayal, the pain. Finally, he said quietly, "Call Sarah. Call Kevin. It's their child." Minutes later, he heard the sound of sirens. Paramedics carried Lisa out on a stretcher while he stood in the hallway, frozen. One of them looked at him and asked, "You coming with us?" Grant shook his head. "No." The door closed. The sirens faded. The house fell silent again. For the first time in years, he felt something close to peace. Not happiness, but the end of a long nightmare. A few days later, Lisa came home from the hospital. She was pale, exhausted, carrying a small bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. Grant opened the door silently, then stepped aside without a word. "This is temporary," she said, her voice trembling. "Sarah and Kevin will take her soon." He nodded, not looking at the baby. That's between you and them. Lisa set the carrier down in the living room. The baby started to cry, a soft, helpless sound that filled the whole house. Lisa rocked her gently, tears sliding down her cheeks. Grant stood in the doorway, watching. Something inside him twisted, guilt, pity, maybe both. But he couldn't bring himself to cross that invisible line between them anymore. He turned away, went upstairs, and closed the door. Downstairs, Lisa whispered to the crying newborn, her voice shaking. "It's okay, sweet girl. You won't be here long." But even she didn't seem to believe it. The nights became endless. The baby's cries pierced through every wall, every fragile bit of calm left in the house. Lisa was exhausted, pale, trembling, barely able to stay awake. She knocked on Grant's door more than once. "Please, can you hold her for a few minutes? I just need to rest." He opened the door halfway, eyes heavy with fatigue and resentment. "I can't, Lisa. She's not my child." Lisa's shoulders shook as she whispered, "You used to care about me." He didn't answer. He simply closed the door. But behind it, Grant couldn't sleep either. Every cry made his chest tighten, not because of the baby, but because of what they had become. Downstairs, Lisa rocked the child in the dark, whispering lullabies through tears. The sound of the baby's cries and Lisa's quiet sobs blended into a haunting rhythm that filled the night. Grant lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, wishing for silence, and realizing that silence would never mean peace again. Within days, Lisa's family turned against Grant completely. Her mother called him heartless. Her father accused him of abandoning his vows. They didn't care about the truth, only the story Lisa told them. "You watched her struggle and did nothing," her mother shouted over the phone. Grant's reply was calm but final. "She made her choices. Now she lives with them." The divorce process began soon after. Lawyers, documents, endless meetings. Grant's attorney uncovered proof that Lisa had used money from their joint account for the surrogacy, without his consent. It was a small victory, but it mattered. It showed the truth. Lisa hadn't just betrayed him emotionally, but financially too. When they met in court for the first time, Lisa couldn't even look him in the eyes. She sat silently beside her lawyer, while Grant felt something he hadn't felt in months: clarity. The love was gone, the pain was fading, and all that remained was the cold reality of the end. During the hearings, more secrets surfaced. Lisa had forged Grant's signature on several bank documents to cover medical bills related to the surrogacy. Her lawyer tried to paint Grant as controlling, but the evidence spoke louder. Emails, transfers, clinic receipts, all in her name, all using shared funds. When the judge read the findings aloud, Lisa's face went pale. Sarah and Kevin, sitting behind her, stared at the floor, avoiding Grant's eyes. Grant didn't smile or gloat. He just felt numb. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. For months he'd been called cruel, selfish, cold. Now the truth was out in the open, undeniable. After the session, his lawyer leaned over and whispered, "She'll have to repay what she took. And this will help your custody claim." Grant nodded silently. For the first time, he felt the weight on his chest begin to lift. After the court's findings, Lisa called Grant one evening. Her voice was fragile, but edged with desperation. "Grant, I need help. I can't afford the postnatal care. Please, just a little financial support." He hesitated. "Lisa, I already pay for our kids. You used our savings for someone else's baby. I won't do it again." Her tone changed instantly. "You're heartless. I carried that child for 9 months. Do you even care what it did to me?" Grant's answer was quiet but firm. "You made that choice without me, and choices have consequences." There was silence on the line, then a shaky breath, and the call ended. He sat there for a long time afterward, staring out the window at the quiet street. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel angry, just tired and ready to move on. A week before the final court date, Lisa packed her things. The house was quiet except for the soft sounds of drawers closing and boxes being taped shut. Grant stood in the doorway, arms crossed, saying nothing. The children watched from the stairs, confused and teary-eyed. "Mom, are you leaving forever?" one of the twins asked. Lisa knelt beside them, forcing a smile. "No, sweetheart, just for a while. I'll still see you." But her voice trembled, and even the kids could hear the lie in it. She loaded the last box in her car, the baby sleeping in the carrier beside her. Before driving off, she looked at Grant one last time. "If you ever cared about me, please don't make this uglier than it already is." Grant met her eyes calmly. "Then stop pretending I'm the villain." She said nothing more. The car pulled away, and for the first time in months, the house fell completely silent, a silence that felt both empty and peaceful. The day of the final hearing arrived gray and quiet, like the world itself was holding its breath. Grant and Lisa sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, strangers sharing a history. Before the session began, Lisa turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Grant, please. We don't have to end it like this. We can still fix things." He looked at her for a moment, sadness flickering behind his calm expression. "Lisa, you ended at the moment you chose everyone but us." When the judge entered, the room went still. The verdict was short but powerful. Lisa's actions were deemed a breach of marital trust. Grant was granted primary custody of the children and partial reimbursement of the funds Lisa had used without consent. Lisa began to cry quietly as the decision was read. Sarah held her hand. Kevin stared at the floor. Grant didn't celebrate. He simply exhaled, the first deep breath he'd taken in months. Justice had been served, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like closure. After the verdict, Lisa left the courtroom in tears. Sarah and Kevin followed behind her, whispering words of comfort that sounded hollow in the echoing hall. Grant stayed seated for a moment, staring at the empty chair she'd left behind. He didn't feel anger anymore, only a deep, heavy sadness. Outside, the autumn air was cool. He saw Lisa by her car, wiping her eyes. Their gazes met for just a second. Two people who once shared everything, now with nothing left to say. She looked away first. Kevin opened the car door for her, the baby's soft cry breaking the silence. Grant turned and walked in the opposite direction. Every step felt lighter, but his heart still carried the weight of what they'd both destroyed. That night, he tucked the kids into bed. For the first time in a long time, they fell asleep peacefully. The house was quiet, not empty, not broken, just quiet. And in that silence, Grant finally felt something he hadn't in years: freedom. Weeks passed. Lisa moved into her mother's house on the outskirts of town. The baby, Sarah and Kevin's daughter, stayed with her for a while until they were ready to take full custody. The once bustling woman who filled every room with plans and opinions was now quiet, withdrawn. Her phone stayed mostly silent, her social circle shrinking. Even Sarah and Kevin kept their visits brief, the awkwardness between them impossible to hide. Grant, meanwhile, rebuilt his rhythm. He woke up early, made breakfast for the kids, walked them to school. The house felt lighter, warmer, even with just the three of them. There were still hard days, but laughter slowly returned. Sometimes, late at night, Lisa would text, "How are the kids?" Grant always answered politely, nothing more. For her, the silence after his replies was the hardest part. The realization that the family she'd taken for granted was truly gone. The divorce was finalized quietly, without another fight or word between them. A letter arrived in the mail, a few official pages ending 18 years of shared life. Grant signed it, set it down, and felt something strange: relief. There was no celebration, no bitterness, just peace. He had the house, a stable job, and full custody of the children. They smiled more now, laughed louder, and asked fewer questions about their mother. Lisa appeared from time to time: birthdays, school plays, short visits that always ended awkwardly. The kids were polite but distant, sensing a change even if they couldn't name it. Grant didn't hate her anymore. In truth, he didn't feel much at all. He'd learned that freedom doesn't always come with joy. Sometimes, it simply feels like quiet. And in that quiet, he began to heal. Months turned into a year. The chaos, the courtrooms, the sleepless nights, all of it faded into memory. Grant's life was calm again, built on small routines and honest peace. He often thought about what had happened, not with anger, but with clarity. Lisa had made her choice, and he had made his. Both had paid the price. Sometimes, late at night, he'd sit on the porch after putting the kids to bed. The air would be still, the stars faint above the quiet street. He'd think about the meaning of loyalty, how fragile it was, how easily love could turn into duty and duty into distance. He didn't regret standing his ground. If anything, he felt proud that he hadn't let betrayal define him. He had protected what mattered: his children, his peace, and his self-respect. Lisa is still called occasionally. Her life was scattered. Her choices had left her adrift. Grant wished her no harm, only understanding. Someday, he looked at his kids and saw hope. They were his future, his reason, the proof that something good had survived. And as the night breeze moved gently through the trees, Grant finally smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because he was free, honest, and whole again.